In tonight's primetime focus, the fate of the U.S.-Iran war is hanging in the balance, and it is up to Pakistan to possibly broker a peace deal. Pakistan has a unique position compared to its neighbors. It shares a 500-mile-long border with Iran and is one of the few countries that Tehran trusts enough to actually act as mediators. But most Americans only know Pakistan as the country where Osama bin Laden was found. Its reputation was so damaged that when President Obama sent Navy SEALs in to kill him, they didn't even tell the Pakistani government about it. Senator Claire McCaskill summed it up this way: they were either knowledgeable or incompetent. So, how did a country that once sheltered America's sworn enemy become the one talking to both sides back from the brink of a potentially catastrophic war? Last year, things reached a breaking point between Pakistan and India when a terrorist attack killed 26 people, pushing both nuclear-armed nations to the brink of open war. The U.S. stepped in at the last moment, and a ceasefire actually held. Trump posted congratulations to both countries on using common sense and great intelligence. Now, how much credit belongs to Trump is actually debatable, but there's no question who came out on top politically. It's not Prime Minister Sharif that holds the political power in Pakistan, but in fact, the Field Marshal Asim Munir, a strongman who was called the most reviled Pakistani army chief in decades. And he is in the middle of a political rebirth thanks to none other than Donald Trump. Munir spearheaded the effort to nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. And back home, he has pushed through a constitutional amendment granting himself lifelong legal immunity. And he has been cultivating deep ties with Trump and his orbit ever since, including presiding over a deal between Pakistan and the Trump family's cryptocurrency venture earlier this year. Joining us now is Ravi Agrawal, editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy magazine and host of FP Live. Ravi, it's great to have you back on the show.
To be back.
No one better to talk to about this, because I think for most of our viewers, trying to understand this Pakistan's emergence here and its 180 from a couple years ago would probably catch a lot of people by surprise. So how did Pakistan emerge as the mediator between Iran and the United States? How have they cultivated this trust between these two countries, and what are their chances of success?
Yeah, so the background to this is a couple of years ago, when Trump gets elected, Pakistan realizes it has a geopolitical opportunity. Trump's making a lot of enemies around the world. They've figured out how to approach Trump. They had very good lobbying firms in D.C., and they realized we're out of the mix because America doesn't care about Afghanistan anymore. We need some other leverage in D.C., so they decided to invest in crypto, as you pointed out, people close to Trump. They actually brought literal rocks to the White House, critical minerals. That was the other thing that they knew would really appeal to the Trump administration. And then nominating him for the Nobel Peace Prize. And by the way, India disputes that the United States stepped in, whether they did or did not. History suggests that America did, but India refuses to admit it. But in the here and now, having built these great relations with the Trump administration, the reason why Pakistan stepped in now, first of all, it needs someone to, because it gets 81% of its crude from the Gulf. Two, there aren't that many options left. I mean, Iran is either bombing any of the previous negotiators. Think about Qatar. Oman feels like it was burned in the last round of negotiations. And Pakistan is close to Iran. It has historic ties. Notably, this is a country that does not recognize the state of Israel. So that's why they're not at the table. And these are talks between the United States and Iran, mediated by Pakistan. But they need it, and they like the idea of projecting power globally. So that's it.
How much of their involvement right now is potentially motivated by Pakistan wanting to show its worth, its value to China?
A little bit. So it's very telling that the Pakistani foreign minister and deputy PM, Ishaq Dar, he went to Beijing before these talks began. And you'll remember before there was a 15-point plan from America, a 10-point plan from Iran. There was also a 5-point plan from Pakistan and China. And in a sense, that is kind of where we are. Those opening words about peace and the need for someone to step up had China's blessing. And China, over the years, has invested heavily in Pakistan. They're also very heavily invested in the Gulf states. They want to see this end, even though there are some reports that China may have been arming Iran with shoulder-to-air missiles. And it could be that China simultaneously wants to bog down the United States and Israel in the Middle East, but it also wants to open up the Strait of Hormuz more broadly. I mean, it could pay for vessels to get its own oil out, but it wants to see the region open up. It wants more commerce.
You mentioned the role that Israel plays in all this and the fact that they're not at the table for this set of talks, although they do say that they are, engaging in their own talks with Lebanese officials right now. Can I get your read on all the confusion around the announcement of these ceasefire talks? Because both the Iranians and the Pakistanis made very clear that they thought a ceasefire included Lebanon from the outset, and that at least that was going to be a basis of sort of the 10 points that Iran had, that the Trump administration had agreed to begin the talks with. Then there was this whole walk back from the Trump administration. The reporting suggests Netanyahu got in touch with Trump over this, too. How do you read what really happened there?
I mean, I think you've pretty much laid it out. The fact that Trump had seen the 10 points from Iran and said we broadly agree with the contours of this, and Pakistan made clear time and again that Lebanon is part of this. The disagreement later must have come from Israel saying, we're not done. We will continue to do this. And I think, look, a feature of now the last 2 years, but also the last 20-odd years, is the inability of the United States to rein in Israel. And it makes America look extremely sort of powerless in the region. It reduces American credibility. And the fact, again, that these talks now in Islamabad are mostly about issues that matter a lot to Iran and to the United States. But the Israel-Lebanon issue is a separate track. And this is, by the way, part of the reason why anything that emerges from these talks is quite weak, because Israel could easily blow it up. If matters escalate in Lebanon, that has an impact in Iran as well, and everyone knows that. And Iran also needs to be seen to be protecting its proxies, its so-called proxies, in some form. So, I'm looking at these talks with some hope in that they've gone on all day today, reportedly, which is a good sign. But really, the scope of it, it seems, is to extend the ceasefire, to try and get some crude moving through, which is, I think, what the United States really, really cares about. But in terms of a lasting peace deal or ensuring that this doesn't happen again or that there aren't other arenas of conflict, I don't have too much hope for that.
Does it show America's diminished standing in the region that we are so reliant on other countries to help bring together a deal in a way that we wouldn't have necessarily outsourced in conflicts past?
Well, even before this, the Omanis were the mediators. Part of the issue is that the United States has now twice bombed Iran amidst talks. So the United States has very little credibility right now with Iran in particular, but frankly, globally on this particular issue. Pakistan stepping in as a nuclear-armed country is basically saying, look, we ensure that this won't go sideways in terms of security for the Iranians who've come in. And there are 70-plus Iranians. You all know the American delegation. So you needed someone to be able to broker that. But I think if you step back, the broader diminishment in American soft power from the last few weeks, but also going further back, is immense. And we haven't begun to even sort of scratch the surface of that. I'll say one more thing. We've been talking a lot about inflation in the United States and the price at the pump. Sure, it's bad, but it is much, much worse in Asia, in Africa, countries that rely on fuel a lot more than the United States does. We're net exporter of oil, net exporter of natural gas. I mean, tell that to the Indians, tell that to, Malaysia, countries that are huge net importers, that don't have the money to pay for extra energy when the prices go up, that are growing faster. And those are the countries and the people that are suffering. And in many of those parts of the world, they are blaming the United States more than Iran right now.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to there being countries where the fuel crisis is so much worse than what we're facing here, it does kind of help to remember that we're, in a way, lucky to be able to pay for the price of a war at the gas station instead of by watching our entire neighborhoods crumble or our neighbors lose their lives. That's something to remember. And it's sad because these talks doesn't seem like there's any scenario in which the Iranian people living in Iran win after this weekend. The regime change seems to be off the table. The regime may end up with more money and a new revenue stream and probably more emboldened after all of it. Thank you, Ravi.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Ravi.
Great to have you.